want Detroit sports talk done right? Yeah! If you want it, you got it. It's Detroit sports talk with attitude. It's the Knee Jerks with Eno and Big Al.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like at this time to introduce to you one of the finest running backs in the United States of America, and our number one pick, Barry Sanders.
Here's Isaiah. Let's see what we got. All the way up. Go!
We might not be in your car or on your transistor radio, but we're bringing you the best of Detroit sports past, present, and future. It's time for the Knee Jerks with two guys who know Detroit sports. Here's Greg Eno and Al Beaton.
It's October 19th, 2021. It's day one of the NBA season. It's day whatever of baseball season. I've completely lost track. And it's also, well, week. I don't know how many weeks we have been doing this, Greg. Several hundred weeks at this point. Maybe several thousand weeks at this point. But that means this week it's time for the Knee Jerks, Detroit Sports Talk with Eno and Big Al. I'm the Big Al of the equation, Al Beaton, longtime Detroit-based podcaster and blogger. Joining me, as always, is the man who knows a lot of things about a lot of things, and is enjoying what's left of this Indian summer as he is, I think he's ready to get into his swim trunks and a tank top. It's still nice out outside, and that would be Greg Eno. What's up, Greg?
You don't want me anywhere near a tank top or swim trunks if you value your eyesight. Thank you, Big Al. I am Greg Eno from my Out of Bounds WordPress blog. Check me out there. My most recent piece was about the Pistons. They're going to also dominate our discussion in a little bit here, as you'll find out. We have a very special guest, NBA stats guru Siddy Hall will be joining us, talking about the NBA in a very different kind of a way, from an analytical standpoint, but also from a traditional NBA preview standpoint as well. We'll be talking to Siddy in a little bit, So I wrote a piece yesterday about the Pistons and about Troy Weaver and about how I feel like he holds the key to this whole rebuild thing and not so much Cade Cunningham, but what will Troy Weaver do to bring the Pistons home through this rebuild. And you can follow me on Twitter at Greg Eno and follow the Knee Jerks, of course, on Twitter at the Knee Jerks. We've got the Lions to talk about after we talk to Siddy. A little bit of weirdness going on with anti-vaxxers once again in the world of sports. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the Red Wings and Dylan Larkin and so forth. But before we get to any of that stuff, we're going to play a game that we like to call Whose Birthday Is It, Maestro?
We baked you a birthday cake. If you get a tummy ache and you moan and groan and woe, don't forget we told you so. Happy birthday! Happy birthday!
Everybody knows how we play this game by now. I'll give Al a clue or two or three of an individual whose birthday it is today in the world of sports. And if Al can correctly guess that person within the first two clues, he'll win a year's supply of Tang.
That's what the astronauts drank back in the Gemini and Mercury days. Yeah.
I wonder if Bill Shatner had any of that when he went up to space. He was only up there for 11 minutes, so maybe he didn't have enough time. This person, Al, because we're talking about basketball with Siddy, this person made his name in basketball. He was born on this date in 1954, so he's 67 years old today. I will tell you that he was an NBA player, although not nearly as famous as his son, which might be maybe too big of a clue. Mm-hmm. But he is currently, he was involved in coaching, and he played on the West Coast when he was a player. And I think that's all I'm going to give you right now.
Oh, good Lord. So he would have played from the mid-'70s on into the '80s, obviously. Yeah. And he said his son is more well-known?
Well, far
more well-known. Okay, so that counts out someone like, the timelines wouldn't match up. Anyway, someone like Rick Barry. So, and he played on the West Coast. Left Coast guy. God, I have no idea at this point. So I'm just going to have to pass on the $25 question and wait for the 50. Maybe you'll be a little more giving on the next question. Good Lord. He played on the left coast. That's it.
No. I told you that his son was very famous.
Yes. Sure, yeah. Make excuses. All right, we'll get back to this after we do a little. Well, as Greg said, we have a lot to cover, and we're running out of time to do it. So we got to get away from me bitching about Greg's hints and move on. So joining us next on the show is Siddy Hall, longtime friend of Greg's, who is an NBA stats guru and superfan. He has a lot of opinions. Let's get to it.
Al, when we turn to matters of basketball when it comes to the Pistons and the NBA, we usually turn to our good friend Ray Scott, the former Pistons coach and player, who's always kind enough to come on and share his wisdom. And we had Ray on over the summertime, so we decided we'd go a different route tonight and talk to somebody who I've known for 53 of my 58 years on this earth, and who I'd actually wanted to be on this program for a number of years. I just never had the gumption to ask him. And he reached out to me about 3 or 4 weeks ago saying, Greg, can I be on the show? And I said, why not? The NBA season's beginning tomorrow for the Pistons on the 20th. So we thought it was a perfect time. I thought it was a perfect time to bring this gentleman on the program. His name is Steve Siddy Hall, and he is a NBA stats guru to no end, Al. If you wanted to know who the ninth player on the bench of the Atlanta Hawks is and what his metrics are, Steve will be able to tell you. Siddy will be able to tell you.
I mean, it's not John Koncak anymore.
And John Contract is he got that nickname after McCloskey gave him that big money. But basically, Siddy has been studying this stuff for about 35 years now. I can't believe it's been that long. And he's going to tell us a little more about his background in the statistics aspect. But we're not going to just talk about stats tonight. We're, of course, going to talk about the Pistons. We're going to preview the season. We're going to talk about who Steve Siddy likes, who he doesn't like, what he thinks about Troy Weaver's job so far as GM, and some of the other things that I think our listeners will want to know. But before we get any of that, let's welcome him here. Siddy, thanks for doing this. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Greg. Thank you, Al. It's a pleasure to join Detroit's finest sports podcast. Thank you.
Well, we won't tell them that it's the only one right now. Now that pages podcast bit that does. Basically, thanks. We appreciate that. And we know that you like the show, and we know that you wouldn't have wanted to come on the show if you didn't like the show, so we appreciate that. Just kind of give our listeners, Siddy, a little bit of a background about why you've, or not why necessarily, but how long you've been doing this, what got you into it, why you have such a passion for the NBA, not just as a regular fan, but as a guy who really goes deep into the numbers, who studies this stuff, who watches basketball left and right. Where did it come from, and why have you been doing it for so long? What's kept the drive going?
All right, well, thanks for asking. My obsession with basketball started a long time ago in 1985, and prior to that, I was just your typical, seasonal sports fan. A heavy-duty sports fan, all things Detroit, Michigan, Michigan State. And then one day I just came up with a stat. It just, an NBA stat, and I just started running with it, and it turned into my personal obsession. A strong enough obsession that I stopped following hockey. I missed all the Wings championships despite living in the same city. And because basketball became a 12-month hobby, obsession. So anyway, I developed a few stats that are still proprietary, and aren't really out there. There has been a recent movement, as you know, in the last 20 years in stats. And a lot of those stats have already addressed some of the things I was looking at a while ago. A couple of things are still a secret. And but anyway, that's what led me into basketball and my pursuit of it and my enjoyment of it.
Can you kind of, without, I don't want to, put you on the spot here, but is there anything about these stats that you've worked on since the mid-'80s that you can share with us, kind of give a quick glimpse as to what it was that you came up with and what started this whole thing?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the main, some of the stats have been discovered by other people, team offense, team defense, the understanding of efficiency, that basketball is a game of efficiency, both teams having the same number of possessions. Prior to that, we grew up thinking that any guy who scored 20 points a game was an all-star, and 10 rebounds, these landmark, counting stat numbers were great. And it opened up my eyes to the importance of efficiency. So what's left that I still have that's sort of, proprietary is the understanding of, weighing efficiency compared to volume. What's better? Is it better to score 10 points a game and shoot 65% from the field? Or is it better to score 20 points a game and shoot 54%? And you can take that idea and apply it to free throw shooting, three-pointers, combine them all together. What matters? Is it volume or is it efficiency? Where's the sweet spot? And that applies to Jerami Grant. When he came last year, he suddenly had a huge scoring load that he never had in the past. And his, I don't know, off the top of my head, I think his scoring load doubled. But in reality, he was buckling under the stress of carrying that much load. He started out very well. He's fun to watch. But the second half of the season, he was buckling. And then you ask the question, well, where's the sweet spot? Is it 10 shots a game like he used to do in Denver or, Oklahoma City? Is it 12 shots? Is it 15? Is it 20? And the strange thing is, his numbers have his impact on the offensive end has basically been the same, regardless of the number of shots he takes, because his efficiency changes. Mm-hmm. So where's the sweet spot? I don't know, but it's not what he did last year. It's below that. Maybe it's 15 shots, 17 shots. I'm not sure. But that's going to be one of the signs when the Pistons start improving and turning the corner. I believe one of the signs is you're going to see a reduced scoring load for Jerami Grant. You're going to maximize him.
The team has been so what I call irrelevant for the past 13 years since their last playoff victory, in the sense that they don't really make any noise. They're not one of the teams that have been a darling of the league. They never get a top draft choice. They never make any noise in the playoffs. They're just there. They win 25 games some years. They'll win 36. They don't do anything to really move the meter one way or the other. And to me, it's always been fascinating. I wrote an article about it yesterday. It's fascinating to me how they've been able to be in this limbo for 13 years and not really be bad enough to get a franchise type player, but yet not be quite good enough either to make any noise in the standings. They've kind of stayed in that really weird limbo or what do they want to call it? And now they finally got the number 1 overall pick in Cade Cunningham, but I think what you're going to tell me when I ask you this question, because I know a lot of fans are excited about that, of course, but I think you're going to tell me when I ask you this, what's the reasons, Siddy, that the fans should maybe temper their enthusiasm about this team, despite the addition of Cunningham, despite Luka Garza, despite some of the additions they've made, Olenek and so forth. What gives you pause about this team that tells you that they're still not quite there yet, ready to make noise in the NBA?
Well, first of all, the fans have a lot of reason to be excited. This is a good-looking roster. There's a lot of exciting talent on it. So, yeah, there should be enthusiasm. But what's a little surprising, I think, to fans is the expectations of the national media and the odds makers is much different than the Piston fans. I've talked to a couple of people, and they immediately thought maybe this would be a 500 team. Hey, nothing's impossible, right? Mm-hmm. But if you look around the league, there is a lot of talent on every team. The league is deep. Mm-hmm. It's probably the deepest it's ever been. You have, players don't get hurt for a long time. You have players coming in from all over the world, and you go down, these rosters, and it's like every team's like 10 or 15 deep without any difficulty. So then you have to look at it this way. You compare it to, teams like Minnesota, who's had multiple number 1 picks or high picks, and they're still stuck. Mm-hmm. It's really, really hard for some reason. We're in the honeymoon period right now. Everyone's excited about, basically it's the trio of Cunningham, Saddiq Bey, and Beef Stew.
Right.
And that's, plus Jerami Grant, that's a really nice core. But for some reason, it's just so hard to climb that ladder. I mean, you look at Cleveland right now, they have a lot of talent, and the whole media is just attacking them as being this bad team. And I'm like, wow, they have a lot of first-round draft picks, lottery picks, guys that can do things, and the expectations are low. So we'll see what happens, though. This is a team that has nice balance. I love the Josh Jackson-Diallo combo coming off the bench, these slashers, these athletic guys. And when you look at the team, it's weird, that the additions they made last year, Killian Hayes, Beef Stew, Sadiq Bey, these guys all kind of play below the rim, They're not like they don't dazzle you with athleticism.
Right.
So that's still missing a little bit. Cade brings a little bit more of that, but he's still not, I don't think, a top-flight athletic guy like you tend to imagine a number one pick overall. So Diallo's bringing that. Josh Jackson's bringing that. It's going to be a fun team, It wouldn't hurt them to go down into the lottery again and get one more guy.
Mm-hmm. We're talking with Siddy Hall here, NBA stats guru on the Knee Jerks. I'm Greg Eno from my WordPress Out of Bounds blog, and Big Al Beaton is here. Let's bring Big Al in. What you got for Siddy Hall?
Well, since we're kind of starting on the Pistons, what are your thoughts on Killian Hayes? Because there is one issue. There's an issue with the Pistons, even with there is a lot to be excited about, is that they lack shooting, or they don't seem to have enough shooting, especially in today's NBA, where you either have to score at the rim or you have to score beyond the three-point arc. So that seems to be the Achilles heel to Hayes' game, is that he can't shoot, or at least not shoot well enough to where it feels like the Pistons are playing 4-on-5 when on offense. So do you think the experiment of Hayes and Cunningham together in the backcourt is going to work? Or is there something going to have to come to a head here where one goes to the bench, or maybe they move on from Hayes? What's your thoughts on the whole backcourt situation?
Yeah, well, there's like two questions there. The first one is Killian Hayes an NBA player?
Yeah. That
still remains to be determined. So him playing with Cade, I expect Cade Cunningham's going to help him. Mm-hmm. Killian needs to hide out there a little bit and kind of develop more as like a role player, and then see if over time, he can settle down and develop a three-point shot and figure out ways to contribute. But I'm looking at Killian Hayes as being more of like, at this point, a role player,
yeah.
We don't know yet. He's only 1 year into this, but there were a lot of bad signs last year. But sometimes guys have bad first years. It's interesting. I was going through all the players. I have my system of going through the players every year, the players who appeared in games last year. And one player whose stats jumped out at me as being similar to Killian Hayes as a rookie, and that was Austin Rivers.
Yeah.
And he's now, a 9-year, 10-year journeyman combo guard. He's in the league, bouncing around. And, that seems kind of realistic to me. That certainly seems within, obviously there's a range of possibilities for Killian Hayes, and that's one of them. Now, last year, the Piston fans were just, totally into Killian Hayes. And you could not have a discussion about him. Mm-hmm. If you went on on Reddit, the Piston groups or Facebook, everybody was totally behind him. But I'm beginning to sense that that's changing. When I go on into these forums now, people are starting to criticize him and express doubts about him, and I'm in that camp also.
And just to follow up a little bit, when you talk about Pistons fans falling in love with a player, then falling out of love with a player, there has been the whole Sekou Doumbouya kerfuffle, so to speak, where the Pistons, you had a fan base saying, give him minutes, he needs, he's young, he needs to play. And it looks like now 3 franchises has given up on him in one season, even though I'm sure there's some financial considerations that happened with the Nets and the Rockets and so forth. But I think that might be that's the one thing. I think that's the fear with the fan base, is that maybe they're afraid Killian Hayes turns into the next Doumbouya, or turns into, there's always the Darko thing too, because Pistons fans seem to be deathly afraid of European players as well because of Darko. So, what were your thoughts on Sekou Doumbouya? Was he given enough rope and the Pistons had seen enough, or did they make a mistake and let him go?
I like Sekou. I was sorry to see him go. He did have a bad second year. His career actually has trended exactly like Frank Jackson, who, as a rookie with New Orleans, he was a pretty decent rookie. Nothing spectacular, but he showed signs. You're looking for flashes when guys are rookies. And Frank Jackson showed some flashes. Then year 2, Stan Van Gundy arrived and squashed that, perhaps. Yeah. And he had or actually, I don't think Stan was there for year 2, but year 2 he went backwards a little bit, and then year 3 he was released before the season started, which is exactly the pattern of Sekou's career. And the Pistons, one of those quiet, really nice moves, man. You got to find guys on the cheap, and Troy scooped him up, and Dwayne Casey worked his magic, So, but anyways. Speaking of Dwayne Casey, he did such a great job last year with 11 new faces at the beginning of the year. The offense functioned seamlessly from day one, but the only guy who just couldn't seem to fit in was Sekou.
Right.
And I cannot explain why. I don't know why. But I am excited that he's with the Lakers. There's going to be an opportunity for him there.
You mentioned Dwayne Casey. We're talking with Siddy Hall, NBA stats guru here in the Knee Jerks. I'm Greg, from my WordPress Out of Bounds blog, and that was Big Al Beaton that you just heard. You mentioned Dwayne Casey, and I'm a shameless Dwayne Casey fan. I tend to go out of my way to heap praise on him whenever I write about the Pistons, because I just think he's so well suited for this team, for this franchise at the spot that they're in right now with all the young players. And you mentioned they love new faces and so forth. He and Casey himself admitted at the end of the last season that, Killian Hayes' defense especially, he said, tailed off in the second half, kind of that rookie wall kind of a thing. Of course, he was hurt, which didn't help Hayes. But, Dwayne said, he did kind of take a step backwards defensively for sure in the second half of the season. You mentioned Dwayne Casey doing his magic. Talk about Coach Casey in terms of why he's so important to the Pistons. And, I know that coaches in the NBA sometimes get the short shrift for how meaningful they are to their franchises and the respective rosters. And I know a lot of that has to do with, maybe the quality of the roster or how veteran the roster is. But talk about your thoughts of Dwayne Casey and why you feel like, because I think you share my opinion, why he's a good fit for the Pistons at this time.
Yeah, I love Dwayne Casey. I think the Pistons have one of the great coaches in the league. And, it's hard to measure coaches. It's hard to measure if a coach is great or not, because they're dealt a hand and told to play it.
Right.
But I wonder if last year, in its own way, was Casey's, great coaching job. That was a very, very difficult situation that he had to organize. And remember, that was coming after the bubble season. They had a 2 or 3 game preseason, and 4 rookies, 11 new faces. Blake Griffin coming off that season where he basically didn't function, and somehow had to make. I predicted before last year that the Pistons would have the worst record in the East, which ended up being true, but in no way how I imagined it. I thought they were going to be like Funny Bad, where you just turn it on and watch some comedy, and it was not like that at all. They were very competitive. They had a points per game differential that was equal to what a 31-win team would have. So even they got lucky to end up with that worst record. They were much more competitive than that, and that was a tribute to him. And he brought in, he kept, that ship was in some big waves. He was the captain of it, and he kept it functioning smoothly. They did the transition in mid-season to the young guys. Man, how could you draw it up any better than that and then end up with the number 1 pick? They got a lot done in the last 12 months.
Another thing that the Pistons did, Siddy, that kind of flew under the radar was they brought in John Beilein to work with some of the younger players, and I guess they're calling him kind of a developmental coach. And he's done supposedly he's done a lot of work with Cade on his shooting with other players. Is that kind of a move? Is that in your eyes? Is that tangential, or is that something that's really tangible in your eyes, or is that something that's just kind of like window dressing when you bring a guy like that in?
it can't hurt. I mean, there's a lot of money in the game right now. So, think about the coaching staff and all the people on the fringe of those, all the support in terms of your health, in terms of working out, in terms of diet. I mean, these guys make so much money now that they could each individually have like a health coach, a yoga coach, a shooting coach, a sleeping coach. I don't know.
Right, sure.
Each guy could have his own, group of 6 guys helping him. I mean, yeah, it's got to help. I mean, you look at the players now, how great they shoot the ball, and it's got to be related to, the money they have, the ability just to focus on that, stay healthy, and maybe there are more experts, coming out of the woodwork who know how to teach this stuff. I mean, Greg, did you ever have a shooting coach when you were growing up?
I sure could have used one, but no, I did not.
No, my coach just said, go practice your shooting. That was about it.
Yeah. Instead of the shooting.
Practice your shooting, but not giving you any technique. And like when I played high school ball, I was like, practice, but they didn't really tell you how to shoot, if you know what I'm saying. And that's how you end up with broken shots, like mine.
Well, I'm still waiting for someone to come along and shoot their free throws underhand again. That's been over.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Rick Barry Part 2. We're talking with Steve Siddy Hall, NBA stats guru here on the Knee Jerks. I'm Greg Eno from my WordPress Out of Bounds blog, and Big Al Beaton is here. Let's bring Big Al back in. What you got for Siddy?
Well, since we have a stats guru with us, Greg, I'd like to, I'm somewhat familiar with baseball advanced metrics. Now that people have finally realized that RBI is more of an opportunity. That's because you can bat 150, but if you bat third, you're going to get a bunch of RBIs. Or that batting average, you can hit 300, but if your on base percentage is 310, you're not a very good player. People have started to wrap their heads around OPS and WRC and WAR and things that tell us more about the game, in other words, about a player rather than batting average, home runs, and RBI. So in basketball, you mentioned the counting stats, obviously, points, assists, rebounds. So if someone wants to start learning more about the numbers they should be looking at to tell them how impactful a player really is, what stats should they be looking at? Because I've heard terms like true shooting percentage, and I've heard of PER and things like that, but I'm still not exactly sure what I should be looking for.
Well, you're bringing up a great question and something that could lead to a lot of debate from many circles. People have different philosophies on that. There is no one clear-cut method for evaluating that, and that's kind of interesting. So everybody has their own stats that they go to. These stats are are in development. There are people out there with access to cameras and methods of recording data that most of us don't have access to, and they're trying to learn new things. So, me personally, my philosophy, I like counting stats. I like to keep things simple. I like the numbers to be separated, The problem was in the past is that we were really bad at interpreting them. We used to always, think points per game was important, and it's an empty stat. It doesn't mean anything unless you know what the efficiency is,
Which would be point per possession or something like that, in other words.
Yeah, you have different ways of slicing it, So, right now, true shooting and effective field goal percentage are trying to get a closer, more realistic way of expressing those numbers, A lot of people are into plus minus. And then there's the real plus minus, which is a stat you find on ESPN. And that's sort of like, that's the big enchilada. If you can make that work and trust it, and that's the key word, trust. Can you trust those numbers? As a kid growing up, I played hockey, which had plus minus. And, I remember my coach one time, I only heard this once, but I had a coach tell everyone in the locker room, when you guys give up a goal, everybody gets a -1 because it's everybody's fault. And we all just kind of looked around at each other. We knew that wasn't true.
Yeah.
Tell that to the guy who's skating off on a line change when the puck goes in the net.
So, the basketball, the argument is that there's a lot more data points. So by accumulating data points, you're going to get a better indication of if those numbers work. But I'm skeptical, I don't really, I'm not a big believer in those stats. I look at some of those listings and I start shaking my head.
Yeah.
They don't confirm what I'm seeing. But of course, those people will say that's your bias, So anyway.
Let me just cut in real quick, Siddy, and ask this guy. Sorry to interrupt, but I want to ask this before I forget about it. Is there a way to take some of these current, newer stats, if you will? Is there a way to go back in time and re-look at some of the players in the NBA, not to besmirch their legacies, of course, but is there a way to go back and say let's take Nate Thurmond, for example, and Wilt Chamberlain, which to the average NBA fan, they're going to say, "Oh, Wilt Chamberlain is way better than Nate Thurmond," and he may well have been. I'm not saying he's not, but is there a way to go back in time with some of these newer stats and apply them to players of back in the day, if for no other reason than just for fun, to see how these guys back in the day measure out in some of these newer metrics? I'm always kind of fascinated by taking advanced metrics of modern times and trying to apply them to players of yore.
Yeah, they've been doing that for a while. It's what I call the blender stats. When you put all the numbers together and put it in the blender, come out with one number. They have WAR in basketball, and they have like WAR. I don't rely on it, but once in a while I like to look at it. Just like you just need some tool just to sort of gauge something that's really complex. Trying to get your head around a little bit. Like, for instance, when you're looking at rookie classes on NBA Basketball Reference, they list the career WAR of each player, and you can compare players. But the numbers don't add up to me, When I look at the comparisons between guys, something's off, So I don't trust them. I don't rely on them very much. PER is out there, and once in a while, I'll use that.
What is that? What's PER?
Well, PER is like player efficiency rating, and they take the standard, counting stats and put them in the blender. And I'm not going to say it's a bad stat, but it's got a layer of abstraction that's, it doesn't have units, but. Whatever, man. Once in a while, I'll like it just to compare players because when they're in different eras, maybe they have different, tempos that they play at. So the rebounding numbers are grossly inflated or deflated, and sometimes it can help you a little bit. But I don't rely on them heavily.
Who was the best player to ever play in the NBA, in your estimation?
That's easy. MJ. 23. No doubt in my mind. Who do you got?
I've always been, I've always been a big Oscar Robertson fan because I just feel like he's somebody who doesn't get the notoriety that he should. I've always leaned toward Jabbar as being the best player to ever play, and I'm not going to try to argue with you about MJ because certainly that's a good pick as well. But I just feel like Kareem was. Did things that first of all I thought he was unstoppable. Frankly, I don't know of any NBA player who had a shot like his skyhook that was literally unstoppable. I don't even
it's MJ. Iconic. It's an iconic shot. Well, I'm feeling right now with MJ. What happens? Statistics, the language of numbers is so powerful. It's very hard to argue against. And now we have LeBron James. He's entering year 19.
Wow.
He's been a workhorse. He's accumulating these awesome numbers, straight across the board. And people who watch, younger viewers, a lot of them want to believe that he's the greatest player ever. And, MJ missed a bunch of years, and he, LeBron has passed him in some of these categories, and you have to really, have a strong backbone to put up an argument against against LeBron. LeBron could pass Kareem in the scoring, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm not sure on that. I have to double check that. But, and I feel the same way about like Isaiah Thomas and John Stockton. History is being very kind to John Stockton. Played, I think, 19 years, almost 82 games every year, tops in assists, tops in steals. And, and after time, all you got are these numbers on the page. And if you ask anyone today under the age of, 40, I think all of them are going to tell you that John Stockton was a better player than Isaiah Thomas. And we all grew up, watched that, in person. And I'm horrified by that,
Right.
And so,
I always go back to that game where Isaiah Thomas, after the snub of the Dream Team, he dropped 44 points and who knows how many assists on John Stockton just to make a point. And but then again, we have our 80s basketball bias, and I'm with you completely that I think Stockton was a great player, but he's overrated compared to someone like Isaiah Thomas and numerous other point guards because he was an accumulator. He played for so damn long. But and to kind of follow up on your Michael Jordan, I kind of lean your way too because I just wonder if someone like LeBron James would have been able to play for 19 years if he had played in such a rough and tumble era as 80s and 90s basketball really was, because we all know the Jordan rules. Obviously, there would have been LeBron James rules as well, which would have been very similar. But again, you can't compare eras, so it's always going to be judgmental. And you said, people of a certain age, that's your favorite era of basketball. So these are just tough arguments to make. So I see where you're coming from.
Well, Al, here's why Michael Jordan's better.
Yeah.
Michael Jordan scared you at every moment when he had the ball in any location on the floor. You always felt like you were at his mercy. That's not true for LeBron. When LeBron has the ball 30 feet from the basket, 25 feet from the basket, you got to keep an eye on him. But you can, he's not going to kill you out there. He can shoot the three a bit. But, we saw it in the finals, remember, think about when Miami lost to Dallas in 2011. Dallas had that aging team. It was a fun team to follow and to see win a title with Nowitzki and Kidd and those guys, Tyson Chandler. But think about that. Miami had LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh, and they couldn't get it done. Do you think that would have happened with Michael Jordan?
Right.
Yeah.
And
well, let me ask you this then. What's your thoughts on the trend towards super teams now?
Well, the NBA right now is hitting a spot that we have never seen in a long, long time, which is, they had a great CBA about, 6 years ago or so, 7 years ago, that was supposed to try to create a little bit more parity, which seems to be like an impossible task for the NBA, but we're hitting it right now. So these super teams, look at Brooklyn right now. Yeah. They had the three guys and they're dumping players because they're paying too much tax. They dumped Landry Shamet because they didn't want to pay him his market value. They dumped Doumbouya for the same reason. They dumped DeAndre Jordan for the same reason. They still got a heck of a roster, but there's pressures that were not there 10 years ago or 15 years ago that are forcing teams to, you got to scrap, you got your studs and then, there's not much money left to do anything. It's harder to put the team around it. And you look at Golden State, they drafted that team. They drafted Draymond and Curry and Thompson. So they had those guys under contract at a cheap rate. And that allowed them, they did it the old-fashioned way, draft a team and let it grow. That's really hard to do too, right?
Let's talk about that. Let's expound on that because what I wrote yesterday was about Troy Weaver and about my position was that he's the key, not Cade Cunningham, to whether or not the Pistons are going to be going to make this thing work in the next 3 to 5 years. I know you've been very critical at times privately between you and me of Weaver, but let our listeners know what you think of Weaver so far and what you think he's done good, what he's done bad, and what you think he still needs to do to take this team back over the top.
Well, this is Troy Weaver's first job as being in charge of a team, and that position there are two components. One is, talent evaluation, and two is negotiating and making deals. So the making deals part is new for him. And I think on that side, that's where I've been kind of frustrated with him. I don't think he's a good deal maker, Imagine, you go up to a poker table with 30 teams, 30 GMs. They all have piles of chips, different number of piles, or different number of chips, excuse me. And when he arrived at the table, the Piston pile of chips wasn't very great, Basically, it was, future first rounders. And then the guys he traded last year, it just seemed like a fire sale. And I was just livid at his inability to bring back what I saw as equal value. But you drafted Bay and Beef Stew. And that ultimately, when you take a step back and look, it's like it makes you conclude that picking the right ponies trumps those details I'm talking about. Because the team right now looks good.
Wow, you're a lot kinder to him than I thought you might be. I thought because I know but you know what, you laid it out in a reasonable fashion. You said, look, not a big fan of the trading Troy Weaver, but I'm not the drafting Troy Weaver, not so bad. So,
let me give you an example. Yeah. May I give you an example just for comparison? Look at Christian Wood. Christian Wood was a great player for the Pistons in that 1 year. And he was a free agent. Pistons had the inside track. He had a relationship with Casey. Pistons had the money to pay him. Mm-hmm. And they traded him for Houston. They had to facilitate a trade with Houston to get their 16th pick, which ended up being Beef Stew, who's a really good guy to have, So now that we have Stewart, it's easy to forget that at that time he extracted like no value for that. And to compare that with what happened a couple of months ago, where suddenly he wanted Olynyk, and to do that, Charlotte was the facilitator. They're in the same role Detroit was in by trading Wood. And Charlotte said, okay, what, you need to free up space, so we have leverage on you, so give us Plumlee and give us the 37 pick in the draft. That was a lot. Which enabled Detroit to get Olynyk, who, by the way, is making the same money as Christian Wood, And I'm like, why didn't we just keep Wood, Olynyk, they're similar players, but, Olynyk's 31 years old, Wood's 25, and maybe 26 now. So, he did this roundabout way, and when he was in reverse roles in both situations, he came up a little bit short. Because, that Beef Stew trade, that pick's going back to Houston. All we did was get Ariza and getting a loan on the pick. But he picked the right pony. By the way, that deserves to be talked about a little bit. That is Troy Weaver's big move. That's his big bet. It's Isaiah Stewart. Mm-hmm. When he surveyed the situation, when he arrived in Detroit and he was arriving at his first off season and looking at the roster, he was not enthralled with it. He started, having this fire sale, Kennard, Wood, Bruce Brown, getting, it seemed like 20 cents on the dollar in return. And maybe a little more, but it was a big discount, But when you look at it now, it's very clear that he really, really, really wanted Isaiah Stewart. That's what he was looking at. He had to have Isaiah Stewart. And you know that because out of the 16 and the 19 pick, all the projections had Stewart going in the late first round. He could have just waited. He couldn't. He's not cold-blooded. It would help him if he would be a little bit more cold-blooded. If he were more cold-blooded, he could have obtained a pick later in the first round and still gotten Isaiah Stewart. Mm-hmm. But that's his guy, and he's looking smart right now. He was criticized for that pick.
Oh, God, an undersized center who can't shoot. That's what we heard over and over again.
And he is a battering ram.
He is.
So, bottom line, before we let you go, Siddy, I know you said at the top of the discussion that you'd like to see them maybe dip down to the lottery one more time, but realistically, for the fans out there, what should they be thinking in terms of wins and losses this year? Is this a 25-win team, a 35-win team, or what are you thinking?
Well, what we don't know is, let's just put it this way. It should be a team to win more than that. This is a team that can hit 30 wins. But at the same time, they seem like they could easily turn the ship south if they need to. And that's because they don't have depth at center. Last year they had Plumlee, who had an excellent year, backed up by Beef Stew, and they also had Okafor. Right. And right now they just got Beef Stew, and he might be a guy that gets injury prone. Or not injury prone, but foul prone. Mm-hmm. I'm curious to see how the league reacts to him. He was a bowling ball last year, and I remember he got into it with Giannis once, and I'm curious to see how the league and the refs deal with him. He's really aggressive. I think it's going to be okay. I think, we're going to be glad we have him for those reasons. But my point is, they're thin at the big spot. Killian Hayes at the point guard, if you want to leave him in there for 35 minutes, that could help move things in the direction of a higher pick. But, whatever, man. I mean, these days you can draft a good player anywhere,
Yeah, that's true.
But I'm optimistic. I say they're over. On the over-under, I got them over. Okay. I think they're going to win more than what Vegas has them at. How about you?
I'm kind of where you're at. I'm thinking 30 to 35 wins would be their ceiling, but they could just as easily, be in the 25 win range. I think there's so many things that could go into it. Injuries and guys just tailing off or weird things happening, and you just never know. But I think they're in the 25 to 35 win range. I don't think they're a playoff team yet, but I certainly think things are trending upward. I think fans should rightly be maybe as optimistic now as they've ever been. Big Al, do you have one more thing you want to throw at Siddy before we let him go, or any final comments before we wrap things up?
Yeah, let me, since we're on Stewart, does he end up a center, or do you think his future is the power forward?
I can't really distinguish between those two positions anymore.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. You're right. Since the league is going to positionless offenses and things like that.
Yeah, he's taking on an interesting role, though. He's a serious banger, and now he's trying to knock down a three. And he's he wasn't supposed to be able to do that, and it's going to be interesting to see if he can incorporate that into his game. If he does that, he's going to be, you got your Bill Laimbeer.
He's still only 20 years old, which people have to remember too.
Yeah, he's just his physique is astounding.
Yes.
And then Saddiq Bey, he looks a lot like Mark Aguirre to me. Mm-hmm. So we got Aguirre, and then Stewart, Kate Cunningham. Maybe we got our Bill Laimbeer and Aguirre. That would be pretty good, right?
Just need our Vinnie Johnson. Who's Vinnie Johnson on the team?
Vinnie has not arrived yet. But go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I appreciate the discussion. We got to let you go. We got other things we got to talk about, Al and I. But thanks so much, Siddy, for doing this. I know this is probably years in the making. I'm so glad you reached out to me and finally nudged me to get you on this program. It's been long overdue. And
we need to do it again as well, especially maybe later on in the season.
Yeah, let's maybe reconvene maybe halfway through, maybe around the All-Star break or something. We can catch up and you can tell us what's going on. And
I would love to do that. We'll get an update on the team. I'm optimistic. I'm excited about this team. So tomorrow night we'll see them open with Chicago. And anyway, thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed it.
Oh no, thank you. Thanks again, and take care, my friend. We'll talk to you soon.
Obviously, we'll start with the Lions because, well, they are the only winless team left in the NFL. They lost a heartbreaker to the Vikings on a 54-yard field goal, becoming the first team in NFL history to lose twice in a season on 50-plus yard field goals on the final play regulation. I found it hard to believe that was a record. You would have thought it would have happened to a few other teams, but of course only the Lions. But then, things kind of hit the fan this past Sunday. It was a 34-11 blowout loss to the Cincinnati Bengals, and honestly, the game wasn't even that close. I mean, when you're kicking a field goal down 4 scores in the fourth quarter, that's essentially you're waving a white flag saying we don't want to get shut out, but we know we're going to lose. That's how bad the game was. That dropped their record to 0-6. And Dan Campbell, because of what's happened over the past 2 weeks, Greg, it's made a lot of headlines. First off, after the Vikings loss, now obviously this is a guy we've seen since he got hired with the infamous kneecaps speech. He wears his emotions on his sleeve, and has really become obvious over the past 2 weeks about his emotions. And this is stuff we don't normally see from especially NFL head coaches, where Dan Campbell got emotional after the Vikings game because he was actually started to shed tears while praising his team about how hard they worked, and it was such a tough thing to deal with because it was like the second time in 3 weeks they had lost on a literal last play field goal. And I think it bought him some goodwill just because it was 180 degrees from what we've seen from a guy like Matt Patricia, who his entire press conference after a game was, I got to coach better. That's pretty much all he would ever say. So Campbell seems a lot more open, a lot more emotional, a lot more personable, which is very, he still, in a lot of ways, he still comes across as a player in that way. Yeah. And then we got the polar opposite Campbell after getting blown out to the Bengals, where he was visibly angry. Some of the beat writers said you could see the steam coming out of his ears. He was that pissed. And this time around, it was interesting when you watch the video of the press conference, and they ask him about Goff and how the team has been playing and what's happened. And he starts to talk, and then he holds his tongue for a good, feels like a minute, but like 10 seconds. And it's like, should I say this? Should I say how I really feel? And then he kind of says how he really feels. And he called out his struggling QB, Jared Goff, who legitimately has played really bad, especially against, he has not played well. And then he had his worst game of the season against Cincinnati. And the quote was, Greg, I feel like he has to step up more than he has, and I think he needs to help us, just like everybody else. He's going to need to put a little bit of weight on his shoulders here, and it's time to step up, make some throws, and do some things. And then he kind of adds the caveat, but he needs help. Because he also made a point to say, I don't put this all on Jared Goff. This is a collective. This is a collective offensively. So, and then today, Campbell said he expects to shake up things in practice routine and also on the depth chart. And we'll get into, what that means for quarterback. But, it's funny that, and then after this, barely, I wouldn't even say he threw Goff under the bus, Greg. He just essentially said what everybody was thinking. Then you're starting to hear from the media over the past couple of weeks about, Dan Campbell being the meathead, Dan Campbell not being able to control his emotions, Dan Campbell threw his quarterback under the bus Sunday. I can understand. I just because it's kind of out of the ordinary for a professional NFL coach to wear his emotions so blatantly on his sleeve like this. I think some of the national media are having issues trying to figure Dan Campbell out, if you know what I'm saying. I mean, what he said to Goff, I think Goff had it coming. Goff, it wasn't even that bad. He said he's got to play better. Big deal. But it felt like Campbell had a lot of goodwill built up after crying, and then he kind of lost some of that goodwill after getting blown out and then calling out his quarterback. So, what's your thoughts on this whole Dan Campbell being in the headlines every Sunday?
Well, first of all, there's nobody else to be in the headlines on the Lions other than the coach, because there's
no one else is doing anything. You're right.
Right, exactly. Now, he did open up the press conference by saying right off the jump by saying that when you get beat that badly, it's on the coach. It's on me. That's what he said. That's a reflection on me. Now, that's different than what Matt Patricia would say. You mentioned it a few minutes ago. Yeah. Patricia would do, like you said, that annoyingly and maddening mantra of I got to coach better. Campbell took that a step further and said that's a reflection on me, which I never heard Matt Patricia say, by the way.
Yeah.
He said that was a reflection on me. Now, the other thing about that Campbell said about Goff, which I thought was telling, and which I really also never seen an NFL coach say about his quarterback, is, well, we're getting holding penalties because he's going 10 yards. He's fading too far back, essentially. Yeah. He said that's why we're getting some of these holding calls. I thought that kind of raised my eyebrows. But here's the thing, Al. Campbell is playing with house money right now with at a couple of different levels. Number one, obviously his 6-year contract. But beyond that, he's also playing with house money when it comes to his quarterback. Yeah. I think everybody pretty much knows that Jared Goff is not the answer. He's not going to be the guy. He's not Matt Stafford circa 2009, okay? He's not going to be here for the next 10, 11 years, okay? That's established. He's only going to be here for maybe 2, this year and maybe next.
Yeah.
So Campbell doesn't have to have any sort of pretend artificial allegiance to this guy, whether it's publicly or not publicly. Now, you remember what happened at the end of Goff's tenure in L.A. between he and Sean McVay. There was some, when Goff first got here, we kind of looked at McVay like, gosh, that's kind of mean to be like that to your quarterback, just kind of cast him aside like that.
Oh, it was pretty ugly how McVay, how that relationship broke up.
Right. But now we're starting to see what drove McVay crazy.
Exactly.
The turnovers, not taking care of the football,
and being definitely afraid to throw the ball downfield.
Overthrowing
that is
receivers that are wide open, not the inability to see receivers that are wide open.
2.5 yards an attempt in the first half Sunday. You can't do that. That's ridiculous.
When Campbell said, "You're fading back too far," that's why we're getting holding penalties. I've never heard a coach say that publicly about a quarterback. But again, Campbell doesn't. Everybody knows, including Campbell, and maybe even including Goff, that he's not going to be here. This is not a long-term relationship.
No.
Okay? This is a quarterback that has to get them through these next couple of years tops and keep the lights on, if you will, until the next guy shows up.
Yeah.
Now, the scary thing, though, of course, is that we don't know if the next guy who shows up is necessarily the next guy who's going to be drafted. I mean, that's another scary thing. But for now, we do know that Goff is not going to be. I mean, I knew he was a step down from Matt Stafford. I knew that, but I didn't realize the gap. excuse me, between he and Stafford until I've seen these first 6 games. The gap is pretty noticeable. So I don't think that Campbell feels like he has to, hold this kid's hand publicly or privately. I mean, he's the quarterback. He is making bad decisions.
Yeah.
Frankly, I thought he was a lot more diplomatic. I think it could get a lot less diplomatic as the season goes on. If you think that this was eye-opening, and I'm talking to you, I'm talking to the national media when I say this.
Yeah.
If you think that that's eye-opening, wait till it gets 4 or 5 more weeks down the road, and he's fumbled the ball 3 or 4 more times and thrown 3 or 4 more interceptions. Then you're going to see some real frustration come out. Right now, he's still striking a relatively diplomatic tone. I mean, there's nothing wrong with saying that the quarterback has to make some more plays. I mean, when you're 0-6, but I think that Campbell knows that he doesn't have to treat Goff like one would treat Stafford circa 2009 when you've got when it's likely that the quarterback is going to be. See, here's the thing. This is a very rare situation now where the coach knows he's going to be around longer than the quarterback. You hardly ever see that. That hardly ever happens. So Campbell knows, everybody knows, that he's going to be here long after Jared Goff is gone. Yeah. And you can't say that about a lot of NFL coaches when it comes to their quarterbacks, but you can't say it here. And I think that gives him a lot more, if I want to call it hubris or cash or whatever you want to call it, to kind of be a little bit more, pointed in his. Now, having said all that, Al, if the Lions were 6-0, I'm sure that Dan Campbell would be hopping on the Jared Goff train and would be singing his praises. Yeah. He's calling it like it is. And this is just the beginning of it. I think if this goes on much longer, you're going to see a lot less diplomacy.
Yeah, and you make a great point in that this is one of the rare situations where the coach has more job security than the player.
Right.
You rarely see that, especially with a first-year coach and an extremely highly paid quarterback who's
right.
Who I think is probably his cap hit's going to be close to $30 million if the Lions decide to move on after this year. But yeah, it's it doesn't really bother me to see Campbell be so emotional. Just and in some ways it's refreshing. Because after 2.5 seasons of Matt Patricia, we're very robotic, very unfriendly, a very unapproachable Matt Patricia.
Yeah.
Campbell in that way is a breath of fresh air. But for all the love I see the fan base at times giving Campbell, because they love his in your face, his rah-rah, his emotional style, the jury's still out on him as well. I mean, I think in the fan base it really needs to grasp that. Regardless if you like his style, he's still 0-6 to start the season. Right. That's Rod Marinelli level of bad. And this team, your prediction, Greg, is looking more and more true. This team is going to be lucky to win 3 games at this point.
Oh, yeah.
There's already talk that this team is realistically bad enough to go 0-17.
Sure.
And it's one of those things where, it's when you look at the roster, you look at the schedule, you look at the quarterback, how he's playing, and you look at they went into the season. Like this season was a throwaway for the most part anyway, because they have a ton of dead cap money, and they have a bridge quarterback, and they didn't spend on certain positions, which is now we've seen just how badly that's come to bite them, especially at wide receiver. And all of a sudden you have it's a perfect storm of bad where we could be watching a second undefeated season in a little less than 15 years, which is actually bonkers to think about. Undefeated, winless season. So, I like Dan Campbell, the person. The jury is still out. It's a long ways out on him as if he's a good coach or not, because I'm still. You got to think about, people say, they lost 2 games at the buzzer. But, they lost 2 games at the gun, much in because of Dan Campbell's decision-making, for example. So, because of playing prevent, and, you could argue back and forth about going on 4th down, so on and so forth. So, it's refreshing, as I said, it's refreshing to see a coach be so open in one way, but it's still frustrating to see a team that I think people expected to be bad, but to be this bad in the NFL, that's designed to be a parity-filled league, to see a team this bad is almost impossible. Yet here we are.
That's true. People ask me who are not football fans have asked me, why are the Lions so bad? Aren't they the team that's bad all the time? How is it possible? And this is no joke. Why are they so bad? It's hard for me to come up with a short, elevator speech reason.
No, it's almost impossible to.
Why it is that way?
Yeah.
But Campbell. The only thing that I would say about him is that emotionally, he's going to have to pace himself a little bit more.
Yeah, he's not going to last a season of this with this roller coaster of emotions. Yeah,
this is going to eat him up physically. To be this invested. Now, you talk about the crying thing after the Vikings game. We all would make fun of Dick Vermeil and how he would cry and so forth, and the tears would come, and that was just Vermeil's. That's just the way he was.
That's just how he was. Yeah, exactly.
I remember when he got out. I remember the tears he shed when he got out of the game, when he said he was burned out. Yeah. And then when he came back in, one of the things that he said that struck me was, and when I left, I left the game because I had to. I'm coming back into the game because I have to.
Yeah.
I mean, he's that kind of a guy. Mm-hmm. Campbell's emotion after that Vikings game was. And anytime now, it doesn't matter if it's sports or anything. Whenever a man cries in public, we're still not past that as a society. where that's not going to be torn apart. There's always going to be the haters and the naysayers.
Toxic masculinity.
Yes, right. Yeah. I mean that we're still no more. That's still, we're very dysfunctional as a nation when it comes to seeing a grown man, weep in public.
Right.
Now, having said that, though, I think that I will still take that kind of emotion over the robotic, guy who you just can't get any sort of a straight answer out of him. The name rank serial number guy. There's only a few people that can get away with that, Alex. The Bill Belichick's of the world and so forth. But that's about it. I mean, there's most guys. You demand answers, and you're right. He did make mistakes in the ends of some of these games that did arguably cost them the game. But you like to think that he'll learn from those kinds of things. But here's the thing. I just get the feeling with Campbell that he will learn from some of this stuff, where I don't think Patricia felt like he needed to learn anything. He came from New England. He was the
smartest man in the room.
Right. He was the smartest guy in the room. So was his boss.
I'm a rocket scientist. Yeah.
So he kind of looked at at disdain against the media at times. And
disdain is an understatement, but yeah, I agree.
He never felt like he really felt like that he needed to learn anything, even though he would say, I got to coach better or whatever. Mm-hmm. Campbell, though, I get the feeling that Campbell is the kind of person who can learn and who will learn from some of these mistakes. And whereas I don't think that was necessarily the case with his predecessor. Now, the thing about Campbell's team is he's just so outgunned right now. Yeah. It's hard to really. The only evaluation now we're going to be able to make of him as a head coach when the dust settles at the end of the year, whatever the record is, is not going to be on wins and losses. We already know that. That's out the window. Yeah. It's going to be, well, how is it? How did they play? Did he learn things? Was he a better coach at the end of the year than he was at the beginning of the year? Did he do things differently than maybe he would have than he did them earlier in the year? What did he do with some of these intangible things that aren't wins and losses? Because you can't evaluate him on that. So you got to evaluate him on some of these intangibles, and that's where we're all going to make our judgment on him after year one. It's not going to be was he 1-16 versus 3-14. That's not going to be the yardstick. Right. It's going to be a lot of these other things now. Did he alienate players? How's the locker room? You always heard whispers about Matt Patricia, even before he got fired. And sometimes they weren't even whispers. They were allowed to the media things about, I don't like the way he disrespected me. Go back to, was it Slay that had the problem? Was it Slay?
With Patricia, was Slay and Diggs.
Yeah. And
they were both traded for peanuts.
And I'm sure there were others too. I know there was another guy that got traded too that I think that was
Golden Tate
that dared speak out. It might have been Tate.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing, Al. I don't think you'll necessarily see under Campbell, but those are the kinds of things we're going to use to evaluate him.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's a good point. That if Campbell's he's not going to last 6 seasons if he takes every loss as emotionally as he won't last. Being an NFL head coach is a pressure cooker. Then you add in that pressure on yourself as well, which he's obviously doing. And sooner or later, you're going to boil over. So I hope that. The press conferences are entertaining. I just hope they don't become entertaining for all the wrong reasons. You don't want to see meltdowns on a weekly basis. I wouldn't even want to call them meltdowns, but it could happen later on. The way things are going. I guess the other question is you don't want the team to burn out on this either. Sooner or later there's got to be some results shown for the team to do a complete buy-in. We're hearing all the right things right now from the team, that they'll run through a wall for Campbell. They really, they believe in what he's doing, but that rah-rah shit can get old, especially when you're doing this for a job, not as a college football player. So, again, the jury remains out on Dan Campbell as a coach, but at the very least, it's a refreshing alternative to what we've seen in the past in this town. But talking about all this, about specifically we've been talking about Goff. He's been bad. To say no ifs, ands, or bits about it, he's been a bad quarterback. If he even plays average, league average, middle of the pack quarterback, this team has at least 2 wins. They would have 2 or 3 wins if they had Matthew Stafford under center. But Goff may not have much help, Greg. The O-line is still missing Decker and Ragnow. Ragnow is now on injured reserve as well. And Campbell did mention, as he called them, MAs, missed assignments by the wide receivers, and I think it's pretty obvious at this point that the wide receiver group is the worst in the league, and it's not even close. So Goff's not getting any help. But if you look at his overall numbers, like you heard me yelling about his yards per attempt on Sunday, and you look just the eye test alone, specifically people point out the 4th and 4 where he threw it out of bounds. He just threw the ball away. And then his excuse was, well, I saw they threw a flag, and I thought they would take the penalty and we would get to play it down over. When I was like, what is his thought process if he thinks the defense is going to take a penalty when they could get the ball on downs instead? So Goff just comes off as a broken quarterback right now, and that's the eye test part. He just the body language, his actions on the field, how he seems to be locking in on receivers, and that was always his big. The issue we always heard about him in with the Rams is that if he didn't see his main target, he immediately checked down. He didn't scan the field looking for other receivers, and we're seeing that firsthand with the Lions. And the other telling stat with all this is that the Lions have yet to take a single offensive snap holding the lead, and we're 6 games into the season. So, to no one's surprise, Greg, there's already calls from the fan base specifically. I don't think anybody else who's sane would think that David Blau would be an upgrade. And we saw Blau in 5 games in 2019 when Stafford broke his back, and he went 0-5, and he looked like a rookie. And I don't think he'd be much better now. But the pressure on Goff is only going to be more. It's going to be insane this coming Sunday because we have they're going to L.A. to play the Rams, his former team. Matthew Stafford obviously has been lighting it up. He's got the Rams at 5-1 and is playing. No, he's had I think one off game, but overall Stafford has played really damn well for the Rams, and they're essentially Super Bowl or bust right now. So there's going to be a huge amount of pressure on Goff, and that is leading to, are we going to see a QB controversy brewing, at least like on sports talk radio and if the fan base and online and things like that, because if Goff doesn't step up even a little bit, why keep him under center? You know what I'm saying here. Sooner or later you can't. Bad play is just bad play, and you have to try something. Especially if we see this team reaches 8-0, 9-0, 10-0. It might be worth a change just for the sake of change. You might catch lightning in a bottle. We know that who's ever got playing quarterback on this roster right now, Greg, is not the quarterback of the future. This is not the guy we're going to see under center in 3-4 years. But, if Goff keeps playing like this, it's going to be harder and harder to justify rolling him out there every Sunday without, because we're hearing Campbell talk about accountability and, carrying your weight, and it's obvious Goff is not carrying his weight right now.
Well, again, the coach, has the upper hand here, and like we've both said, that does not happen very often. On the one hand, Al, it's because it's not about wins and losses. What are you going to get when you put? What are you getting in David Blau that you're not getting with Jared Goff? I mean, there's a reason why these guys are backups.
Yeah, and honestly, you're probably getting a worse quarterback, even as bad as Goff has been.
You like to think that Goff can play better. I understand like you said, he's got the worst wide receiver room in the league. I get it. I mean, he's certainly not equipped with a bunch of offensive weapons. He's got a depleted offensive line when it comes to health. He's got a left tackle who's a rookie who's still, trying to find his way. Mm-hmm. He's a work in progress. This is a 20-year-old kid who I don't think even played football last year, and it's starting to show. I was listening back to September 21st program when we were talking about, the question at the time was, not necessarily you and I, but the question at the time was, geez, does Penei Sewell stay a left tackle after?
Yeah, that question's been answered.
Because he played a couple of decent, because he played a couple of decent games, and of course everybody goes crazy and says he's the second coming of Joe Thomas and Anthony Munoz. But no, I mean, come on. I mean, he's sinking back to a rookie who's struggling, who hasn't played football in a year. Yeah. I mean, that's what he is. Now, I'm not saying he's not going to be good. I'm not saying that he was a bust, but that's 2 years in a row now, Al. But the Lions' top pick has flamed out. Now, it could be, in Okudah was injury and maybe a dysfunctional coaching situation.
Right. Then
he got hurt, of course. And now with Sewell, it's not looking great right now.
Right.
But these are the kinds of picks you can't miss on. We talk about you got to find players later on in the draft. True. But you at least got to get these right. If you're drafting 3, 7 overall, that kind of thing.
No, a top 10 pick should be an immediate starter and be an impact player. Yeah.
I feel for Okudah. I really do. I mean, I don't know how good this kid is, and I don't know if he's going to come back, frankly, from this injury.
Right.
Hunky-dory, because there are a lot of players who don't ever come back from an injury like this, and he was already behind the 8 ball in terms of his development.
Right.
Sewell is a guy that can look really good and then look really bad. I mean, he's a rookie left tackle. He's left tackle now. He's a rookie tackle in the NFL, playing against really, really good edge rushers and really, really good players. And he's but again, this team wasn't going to go anywhere anywhere. How many times have we said that about every Detroit team? It seems like they're not going to go anywhere anyway. So this is where a guy like that takes his lumps. The Goff thing will settle itself. They'll either cut ties with him at the end of this season, as soon as the end of the season, or at the very latest, the end of next season. And now they say that the 2022 class of quarterbacks isn't great. So maybe they'll stick with Goff through 2022 and then try to find their savior in 2023. The Lions have 5 first-round picks, Al, over the next 3 years of 3 drafts. So they have 5 first-round shots at this over the next 3 years to get the guy that will indeed be their quarterback. I don't know if they're going to find him or not.
Right.
But I don't know about you, but maybe this is just my naivety. But I didn't think that Jared Goff, now granted it's only been 6 games, but I did not think he was as much of a step down from Matthew Stafford as he's shown to be. I thought that we see a difference, of course. But the difference that we're seeing is so great. It's almost like watching Stafford immediately followed by his backup playing for 6 games. Yeah. And that's the stark. Now, the numbers at the end of the game now don't look all that bad. That's why, we talk about when we're talking with Siddy Hall about numbers in the NBA segment. Sometimes these numbers may look okay, but when you start to dive into them, you look at Goff's stat line, and it's okay. 28 for 42 for 205 or whatever.
Yeah, but he had under 100 yards passing through 3 quarters.
Right.
That's the thing. It's all garbage time.
That's the thing. It's not so much what were your numbers, but when and how did you accumulate them is what it is in the NFL. And I'm just really surprised at the talent gap. And maybe I shouldn't be. Again, maybe that's
I agree with you. I was expecting at worst a league average type quarterback. A middle of the pack guy who's not going to be a Pro Bowler, but he's not. But this is a guy right now who's playing like a bad backup. You're right. You nailed it. He's playing like David Blau 2 years ago, essentially. I was not expecting him to be this bad. You're right. I was not.
He's playing like he's been thrust into the lineup. Like he's like the Jeff Comlow of 1979.
Yeah.
He's been thrust in there.
Deep cut.
That's what it feels like.
Yeah.
And he's got happy feet. He's not broken. Good under pressure.
And it's probably and it's got to be up in his head. He really looks like a broken quarterback.
He's not good under pressure. He makes the sacks that he takes are 10, 12, 13 yards. You can accept the sack. If a guy loses 4 or 5 yards on a sack, 7, okay. Goff loses 10, 12, 13 yards every time he's sacked, it seems like. And he does not protect the football whatsoever. And you just hold your breath every time there's a little bit of pass rush. You don't know what he doesn't seem like he's not the kind of guy that's going to make a great throw under pressure. And that's what this league is all about, is pressuring the quarterback. And and these other teams know that.
Yeah.
Now he's going to go up against Aaron Donald on Sunday. And I don't know what that's going to end up being like.
Right.
Well, this could be really incredibly ugly this coming Sunday, by the way.
Yeah. Well, I agree there. Well, yeah, and that's, we were being told before the season started, well, this team's going to have an elite offensive line. Well, that kind of out the window because of injuries. But we're going to run the ball, and we want to run the ball. Well, you can't run the ball if the defense does not respect your quarterback's ability to throw it.
Right.
And if I'm a defensive coordinator right now, I am putting 8, 9, 10 guys in the damn box because what's Goff going to do?
Right.
He's not going to throw. He's proven that he's afraid to throw it deep, or he's got wide receivers who can't get open deep, and so people were expecting a breakout season for Swift, and it's not going to happen because his quarterback is not going to allow that. I mean, there's a reason why Swift is leading the league in running back receptions, because that's the only way they can get him to the ball in space, because it's not happening on the ground game right now because no one respects Goff's arm or ability to throw the ball right now. And that's I was not, like I said, I was not expecting a Pro Bowl caliber quarterback. I was not expecting to see a worse Bill Munson, essentially. So I want to go deep cut too. So. But yeah, I'm with you. It could get very ugly Sunday. I think the line right now is like 14.5.
Yeah. I'm
very, very tempted to take the Rams right now. I don't see how the Lions can keep this game close.
Right.
The one team is essentially already waved the white flag on the season with the roster they've built, and then you got the Rams, who is essentially, if they don't win the Super Bowl, this season's a failure. So, yeah, I'm with you here. I think Sunday could get very, very ugly, very, very fast, and we could be in for a very ugly couple of days, Sunday night into Monday, as to how the fan base and media reacts to how the Lions play out in the West Coast. And they not like they have a reputation for playing well on the West Coast anyway. So It's going to be, I'll just say this, I'm glad I'm going to be up north this weekend, so I don't have to. I'll probably listen to the game, but at least I won't have to witness it firsthand with my own eyes. I can just listen to it and drink some beers and sit by a fire and walk away and do my thing rather than because if the Lions are on TV and I'm home, I'm likely going to watch the goddamn game. So, and I have a feeling this game is going to be like watching a train wreck or a giant accident in NASCAR. That's how it's going to be. So, all right. Before we move on from the Lions and the NFL, we need to talk about what happened to John Gruden this week, Greg. That was. Well, here's the story. Gruden stepped down from the Raiders. He resigned over racist, homophobic, and misogynistic emails. Pardon me, I've had a beer. I'm having trouble speaking about misogyny there. The New York Times received emails. They were leaked emails, which that's the whole thing right there, and reported that Gruden frequently used racist, misogynistic, and homophobic language in emails with Bruce Allen, the then, president of the Washington football team. And these emails are from 2011 to 2018, while Gruden was working as on Monday Night Football for ESPN. These emails were discovered as part of a workplace misconduct investigation, essentially sexual harassment investigation, which, Greg, that's a whole other giant can of worms with that, because there's involving pictures of naked Washington cheerleaders being emailed around, and the Washington football team has a very toxic atmosphere. Yet this is what comes out, and from what we hear from the investigation, there's not much going on when it comes to Washington, but they found all this with John Gruden, so Gruden didn't have much choice, because if he didn't resign, I think the Raiders would have fired him for cause. So right now Gruden did resign. First off, we got to say, First off there was one email released where he used the term with the head of the NFLPA. He said he had lips like Michelin tires. And obviously that's a racist trope. And his excuse was, I was trying to say he had rubber lips. Huh? Okay. And then a day later, even more and worse emails come out, including obviously using racist tropes. He denounced the drafting of a gay player. That would be Michael Sam of a few years ago. He used numerous gay slurs, mostly aimed at Roger Goodell. So you can read into that what you will. He criticized the league for trying to reduce concussions, and also he criticized the league for tolerating players protesting during the Player of the National Anthem and standing up for the Black Lives Matter movement. So essentially, John Gruden went from as head coach making $10 million a year to being exposed as a blatant racist, MAGA. Okay, that's right, because he also insulted Barack Obama and Joe Biden as well. Essentially, exposed as a racist, mean-spirited, ugly, far right-wing nut job for the most part. And Gruden was owed $40 million, and there's going to be some sort of settlement probably negotiated with the Raiders, even though the Raiders would probably win in court if they had said you were fired for cause. So what gets me about this whole story, Greg, one, obviously this was the league obviously leaked this. They wanted people to know about this. It really feels like, we need to tip the scales from people talking about what's going on in Washington. And we have Gruden here who's coming off of this raging asshat. Let's throw him under the bus instead. Let alone there was also talk that the Raiders were unhappy with the deal they had given him. It was, 10 years at $10 million a year, something ridiculous like that. So there's a lot of conspiracy theories being thrown around about why these emails come out, when they came out, and who they were targeted at. Also because of the Roger Goodell, the slurs aimed at him. So yes, Gruden deserved to be thrown under the bus. Gruden deserved to lose his job. Gruden deserves to be blackballed from the NFL, much like Colin Kaepernick was blackballed from the NFL. For all the wrong reasons Kaepernick was blackballed from the NFL. Gruden should not work in the NFL again. Who knows if he'll get a redemption tour. We see that way too often nowadays. But this whole thing is so messy, Greg. Not just in Gruden's actions, but how this was leaked out and how it really feels like the NFL purposely did this. Great, they got rid of a racist, but it makes you wonder how much more is out there that we're not hearing about when it comes to all these old white men running the NFL.
Well, yes, that's true, but you can only get rid of these kinds of people one at a time. I mean, you have to. One of my frustrations with what's going on in the world, at least in this country, is a lack of accountability for anything. I mean, people can just do and say whatever they want, and it seems like it doesn't even matter anymore. Yeah,
we'll talk about how actions you can be accountable for actions in a little bit. So right. I agree there. Right.
So when a guy like this, shows this kind of this ugly side, which isn't just some, a drunken rant somewhere or somebody lost control of themselves.
Yeah, this is 7 years worth of this.
This isn't, this is a pattern of behavior, obviously.
This is systemic.
And it's more than just, it's not, hey, everybody's got to have, everybody can have their own opinion, and it's beyond that kind of thing too. So, but you can only get rid of these people, these kinds of people, when these kinds of things come to light. I mean, you're right about, of course, there's probably lots more folks like that in the NFL and any sports league, but let's just talk about the NFL for right now. Yeah, of course there are. Of course, sure. And until somebody is either stupid enough to show that side of them publicly, or when this kind of thing happens with leaked emails, until that kind of thing happens, you're not going to know who they are. Yeah. And they're going to be, cloaked in they maybe they're known within the NFL circles as being that way. But when it comes to it, which is, by the way, Al, which you wonder what it takes to if these kinds of folks are known to be around in the NFL, sans leaked emails and sans some public display of idiocy. Right. I guess the league, doesn't really do anything until it becomes to the point where they almost have to do something. In other words, if these emails had not leaked, John Gruden would still be coaching, and he would still be, probably sending more ugly emails to other people, and this kind of behavior would just continue to go on. That's why it's so important that no matter who it is, that these kind of folks, get essentially fired from the league. I don't think he'll ever. I can't imagine him ever getting another job in the NFL. Now, I don't think frankly, he shouldn't get another job as an analyst either. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what network would have the temerity to even hire him to be on the air. Yeah, unless he went to Newsmax or something like that, or Onan. Yeah, right. But and then there's you hear the argument from some areas of the media. What side it's coming from. Well, what about players that do things like this? Well, yeah, they should be out of the league too. I'm in complete agreement that guys like, look at the Ray Rice thing. He was only going to get suspended for 2 games. Then the video came out of how vicious of an attack he did on his wife, and then all hell broke loose. So, and he never played in the league again. But then again, he was also essentially washed up as a player anyway. But yeah, there's players out there that I agree should be treated the same way as Gruden. They should be booted out of the league. Playing in the NFL is not a right; it's a privilege. And yeah, there are players out there right now that I would not want to see on the Lions. There are players out there right now that I don't think should be allowed. They should not have the privilege of playing football because they've proven again numerous times due to hitting women and. Look at Richie Incognito. He's a racist piece of shit. How many opportunities did he get in the league? He never should have gotten more than the one, for example. Or Tyreek Hill. He's, they love him in Kansas City, but he's a piece of shit human being. But he catches passes and is really fast, so he gets a pass essentially. Realistically, he probably shouldn't be even in the league either. So I completely agree. Players should be treated much in the way as Gruden because being in that position is a privilege, not a right. And I do agree there that there's a double standard and that shouldn't be there completely. Well, I mean, you just had one person I could tell you one guy who's happy about this is Urban Meyer. Yeah, he's probably the happiest guy of them all. Because it knocked him right off the front pages. But, all you can do is what the NFL did or what the Raiders did. I mean, that's all you can do or what he did. It's credit to the Raiders that they did the right thing and said, we're done. I mean, that's all you can do. Yeah. You're not to be lauded. You're not a hero for doing it because it's the only thing to do. Yeah. But it's the only thing you can do to have any sort of hope of keeping this kind of stuff. People can always be private, of course. People can always, spew that kind of stuff and not be detected or keep it among a really tight inner circle and nobody. Yeah, because the reason this came out is because Allen was on Washington's official email. If this had been on Allen's Gmail account, this never gets out. That's how dumb these people are. Isn't it funny that, or ironic that it was Allen of all people whose own team ended up changing its name because of political pressure and so forth. Exactly. All right, before we move on to a couple more topics and wrap things up, Greg, get to question 2 of the birthday game. Well, born in 1954, I will tell you that his nickname is a candy that is often seen on Easter Sunday, but it's not chocolate. That's his nickname. He went to LaSalle. He's the father of arguably one of the top 5 greatest players ever played in the NBA, who tragically lost his life recently. And he was drafted in the first round of 1975 by the Sixers, but played several years with the Clippers.
Why am I drawing a blank?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
Last week you drew a blank on
I know.
Mario Lemieux.
Yeah. Oh. A first-round draft pick, played at LaSalle. Played with the Clippers.
His nickname is a candy you often see at Easter time in Easter baskets.
Mm-hmm.
But not.
And he said his son is a top 5 player.
Oh, and his son died in 2020 in a plane crash.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you gave it away, but I can't. Yeah, it's Joe Bryant.
Yep, Jelly Bean Joe Bryant.
Yeah, I had to, because when you said that, I go, okay, now I don't know if I can remember his first name.
Yep.
Yeah, I wouldn't have gotten it if you hadn't said plane crash. I really
Jelly Bean Joe Bryant.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, all right. Well, I will take the Tang as just because your first clue was so shitty. So.
I made up for it with the second clue.
Yeah, you did. You made up for it with the second clue.
Overly generous.
All right. All right. A couple more quick topics because we want to talk about what's going on at Washington State. We also want to talk about Dylan Larkin. So yesterday, Greg, this is kind of a combined topic with COVID-19 because of Kyrie Irving as well, because he's an idiot as well, as long as Washington State's now ex-head football coach, Nick Rolovich. Rolovich was fired yesterday for refusing to take the COVID-19 vaccine. Back in July, Rolovich said he would not get vaccinated, quote, for reasons which will remain private. And we always know what that means, that it's political. The next month, both Washington State and the state of Washington, their governor, Jay Inslee, and, of course, Rolovich is the state's highest-paid public employee in the state of Washington. They issued a vaccine mandate for all employees with a deadline of yesterday. Rolovich, so they gave him a lot of rope, plenty of time to figure this out, even though everybody saw this coming. He was not going to do it. Rolovich tried a Hail Mary by applying for a religious exemption, which was absolutely ridiculous because there's not a single mainstream religion that says don't get the vaccination. And that was, of course, denied. So yesterday afternoon, Washington State fired Rolovich along with 4 assistant coaches. So essentially they gutted the entire coaching staff for their stupidity. And this is where it really gets dumb, Greg, is Rolovich will not be paid the remainder of his contract because he was fired for cause. Essentially, Washington State fired him because he would not be able to do the job as required by the state and by the school. No, that he would not be able to do it effectively with the type of things they would have to change. It just couldn't be done realistically. And so he is leaving 60%. He would have been owed 60% of his base salary, which is $2 million for the next 3.5 years. He left $4.2 million on the table that he would get if he had gotten fired without cause, which is absolute. So essentially, he's playing the martyr for $4.2 million, and obviously his 4 assistant coaches are playing the martyr for less. And this is also goes into the Kyrie Irving story, Greg, where the Brooklyn Nets just said, we don't want you playing right now. We don't want you on the roster because Irving plays for Brooklyn, and the city of New York has a vaccine mandate. If you play in a public facility like they would at their arena, you have to be vaccinated. Los Angeles and San Francisco have the same rule, so you would not be able to play road games in L.A. and San Francisco. So Kyrie Irving is losing out on $35 million worth of salary. I'm at a loss, Greg. I mean,
I don't get it.
I don't get it either. How could Irving's excuse was a very lame excuse, saying, "I am doing it in protest of people who have to get vaccinated because of mandates." One, mandates have been deemed legal through court case after court case after court case, including the Supreme Court. And both these guys never said a squawk about vaccines until this one. I'm sure they both had the polio and smallpox and all the other vaccines that is required to even go to school. Yet these boneheads are just throwing away millions and millions of dollars and making themselves laughing stocks to the vast majority of the public over something so boneheaded. I can't wrap my head around this, Greg. I really can't. Rolovich, he should have been fired months ago, because that was just like a giant boulder rolling downhill. You knew this was going to happen at Washington State. And the Irving stuff, he's an idiot. He's been proven to be an idiot for years. So I guess I shouldn't be surprised he's doing something stupid.
We talked a couple of weeks ago about Tyler Bertuzzi, and you and I couldn't believe someone has access.
400,000. He's leaving on the table.
Who has access to all these great medical people and doctors and treatments and equipment and so forth could land on the side of no vaccination. Same thing with Irving. I mean, and you said it a few seconds ago. These kinds of people, Al, are not winning in the court of public opinion. It's not like that it's not like they're making this decision. Well, I'm giving up all this money, but at least everybody's on my side. It's not like that at all. Instead, it's most people are doing what you and I are doing right now, which is, head scratching, and I can't wrap my head around it, blah, blah, blah. The coach in Washington State, I mean, I don't know who he thinks he is. I don't know what, I always like to ask the families of these people, the ones who are truly affected by these decisions. I mean, maybe they follow the same political ideology. I don't know, but these are people, or his kids even, people who don't have any say-so in the matter, who are affected by these decisions. I don't know enough about Kyrie Irving's personal life to know whether or not he's married or has kids or anything of that nature. I mean, obviously there are more. I understand there's more important things than money. I understand that. So to only look at this from a financial lens is not right either. But does it make their decision any more right? When you take that financial thing out of it, it's not, because it's not about. It really isn't about money. It really, I know that to us, it's like, gosh, how can you throw that amount of money away? But our frustration with people like that isn't, gosh. Yeah,
in the end, it's not about the salary. It's about doing what's right for society. Right, exactly.
And, so it's too bad. I don't know what, again, some of these whack jobs who get their medical advice on Facebook and through TikTok, that's one thing. But these people, Al, this is what I don't understand. These professional athletes, and even the coach at Washington State, these people are surrounded by doctors and medical personnel and trainers, and they, of course, they have their own personal doctors on top of all that. How they can end up despite all of that info, and education, and I'm sure people come and talk to these teams. Like they come to their training camps or practices, whatever, and talk to the entire team about this. How after all of that, you can still land on the side of the fence that they're landing on? I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to say about it. The only thing that gives me solace, Al, is that these people are in the minority, of course, and they are getting blistered in the court of public opinion. So that gives me some, makes me feel a little good that at least they're not being lauded.
Right.
They are being lauded by a certain segment of society, of course, but a vast majority of us are not lauding them whatsoever.
Kyrie Irving, that one too is just. I mean, they built that. He was supposed to be one of the pillars of a team that's was going to compete for a title. Now, over something completely avoidable, things are. They're still going to be a very good team, but Kyrie Irving could be a difference maker between that team making it through the playoffs, and to do so for such a boneheaded reason is just, like I said, I can't wrap my head around it. And the Rolovich thing, I think he was dead set on playing the martyr. I don't know why that got played out like that, why he felt that way, but he was dead set. I'm going to be I'm going to play the martyr in this. I'm going to lose my job, and I'm going to make a point. And it was completely futile. It really was.
Well,
A legitimate school is not going to hire him because could you think of the uproar, say, if a Big Ten school tried to hire him or another Pac-12 school tried to hire him? It would never happen because the vast majority of schools have the same policies as Washington State. And the other thing to remember that large universities, those tend to be they tend to be liberal, pure and simple. They tend to lean that way and lean towards things like getting your ass vaccinated. So I don't see him. The only kind of place I can see him ever working again at a high level, relatively high, would be a place like Liberty, God forbid, which is an absolute high ability.
Here's the other aspect. We're talking about the medical thing and all the doctors and so forth. And here's the other thing, though, Al, that these types of people have that the normal TikToker and Facebook person doesn't have, and that's that whole team concept. You've got teammates that are relying on you, and even more so in the NBA than even in hockey with Tyler Bertuzzi. You've got all these teammates now who are relying on you. How would Rolovich's players feel at this point? Since he threw him under the bus. At what point does that matter? You're in the trenches with these guys, and you're trying to win championships, and you're trying to win games and so forth. And now here comes COVID, and here comes the vaccine. And now, at what point does all of that camaraderie and doing it for my teammates, and it's not even about, let's break it down. If you're not going to do it for society, then at what point do you do it for your teammates? What point do you say, okay, I'm going for the, that's where I'm at too. That's another aspect of this that I don't understand, because there's all these things that they have that you would think would make them lean toward taking the vaccine. And we have to say also, for context, it's not like this is running rampant. I mean, the Kyrie Irvings of the world and the Bertuzzis of the world and the coach from Washington State, these are, thank goodness, these are the outliers. Okay, but we have to keep this in context.
Right.
But still, it doesn't change the argument or the question as to how somebody with even the pull of, doing it for your teammates and has Kyrie Irving's teammates, for example, try to reach out to him and say, look, man, what are you doing here? I mean, come on. I mean, I did it. I'm fine. All the other teammates did it. They're fine. My mother did it. She's fine. My brother did it. He's fine. At what point do I guess my question is, how does none of that matter? How after all of that can you still say, nah, not for me?
Yeah. And in the Washington State coach, how can you be a leader of men and not make that tiny little sacrifice of getting jabbed in the arm?
Right.
And when your entire team, all your players had to be vaccinated to be able to play. It's absolutely bonkers to me that someone could be so selfish, especially someone who's being paid millions to mold kids. And that sure is, he sure didn't do that. All right, before we wrap things up, we got to talk about Dylan Larkin. Larkin was suspended for throwing an understandable sucker punch. I thought it was understandable. It was a wild season opening game. They lost. Wings lost 7-6 in overtime to the Lightning, and Bertuzzi had 4 goals. The Wings blew a pair of 3-goal leads, and it was just it reminded me of an 80s wide open hockey game. I kind of missed those, to be honest with you. Yeah. But what made the most headlines of that game was Larkin being boarded headfirst by, he got cross-checked in the back, then into the boards head first by Lightning forward Mathieu Joseph. And since there was no whistle call, there was not going to be a penalty from the refs. An injured Larkin, you could tell he was stunned because he lay there for a second. Then he got up and he immediately retaliated with a glove sucker punch. And he knocked him down. He hit him pretty good, but it was with his glove on. It wasn't like it was a bare-knuckle punch. So Larkin got a game misconduct and was ejected. It was the only penalties that were called were all the stuff after the fact, the punch and the the pushing and shoving that happened afterwards. There was no penalty on Joseph for really with a move that could have hurt Larkin. And this is all understandable because Larkin, his 2020-2021 season was ended on an uncalled cross-check to the back of his neck by the Stars' Jamie Benn, which resulted in Larkin spending most of his summer in a neck brace. So, in the end, all the fallout for this was the NHL Department of Player Safety, which is coming off as a complete joke at this point. They suspended Larkin for one game while saying nothing about the hit that pissed Larkin off. And Larkin admitted after the fact that he was seeing red. He was so angry. And the main reason he was angry is that the play wasn't called, and that's the second time in 2 games for him where he was blatantly cross-checked and nothing got called. So all of a sudden now we're hearing again players are going to start taking stuff with their own hands. We're talking about the Wings may need to find a goon, which I hate that stuff. But if the referees and the Department of Player Safety don't get a handle on this, we're going to go back to seeing goons on the ice.
Well, I mean, that was what their role was, of course, was to keep that kind of stuff from not happening.
For example, I remember after this, people say, well, Steve Yzerman never retaliated like that. Yeah, because he had Bob Probert, Joe Kosher, and Dylan McCarty next to him.
Right.
That's why he didn't have to do it.
Yeah, I mean,
when you got Giovanni Smith, and he tried, but he got stopped before he could do anything.
Yeah.
But, it's...
The league is... Things move so fast out there, Al, and I'm not trying to justify or condone what happened to Larkin the other night because it wasn't right. But the league, these players, everything moves so fast. They're on skates. It's very, very fast. I don't think that some of these things that look really bad are intended to be bad. I think that sometimes you're just trying to make a hit. And at the last moment, maybe the guy that you're trying to hit.
The Ben hit was a legit cheap shot. You could maybe make the argument that he didn't mean to do it, but he still ended up hitting him in the numbers. And you don't hit a guy in the numbers.
I remember when the league went to really started to enforce that you can't hit a guy from behind.
Yeah.
And Gordie Howe said, well, if I'm chasing a guy, how the hell am I going to hit him from the front? But Larkin, it was only one game, the suspension. And,
I wouldn't surprise he would have missed that game anyway because of what happened to him.
He was fine with the suspension. I'm sure Jeff Blashill was fine with it. I'm sure Steve Yzerman was fine with it.
And it was interesting that Blashill essentially said the same kind of stuff. Says this is unacceptable. We may have to take actions into our own hands.
Well, I mean,
you don't hear a coach saying that very often.
No, not anymore. You're right, because that kind of thing has kind of gone by the by.
Right.
But when you're in the heat of the moment like that, like Larkin was, he reacted like a human being. I mean, he was. I mean, now if this becomes maybe that's why he was only one game suspended. But if this becomes some sort of repeat behavior by him, and he just becomes this hothead out there. But I'm sure the league took into consideration what happened to him last year, and they took a look at the hit on tape of what precipitated what he did on opening night, and came up with the 1-game suspension. Because basically, saying like, look, you can't do it. We understand your frustration, but you still can't be a vigilante out there. You can't take the justice of the league into your own hands. But it wasn't at the end. But at the end of the day, Al, it wasn't like Larkin cold-cocked this guy in the back of the head and knocked him out. I mean, it wasn't. I mean, let's keep things into perspective here. He had a reaction, obviously a visceral reaction to what happened to him, and frankly, he didn't even really make all that much contact with the guy. Yeah. He really didn't. It was more just the idea that he did it. So the suspension was probably okay and was justified 1 game. And but your comment about what Blashill said, that cryptic comment about taking matters in their own hands. The officials are in a tough spot too, because again, the league is so fast. Even with 2 officials out there, 2 referees out there, you're going to miss stuff, or things are going to look different out of the corner of your eye. Maybe people seem to think that these officials see everything that happens right in front of them. They're skating up and down the ice, and things are in their peripheral vision. They see things not always looking like you and I would look at a computer monitor. It's not this. They're not looking at the game that way. They're looking at it through almost a 360-degree panoramic view, something can be going on over here to their far right or their far left, and then they catch maybe something that happens immediately after that that's more in their line of vision, and that's what they end up seeing. So, it's a tough game to officiate, but that's what you have that's what you have videotape for. I mean, the teams send tape, Al, to the league every day with hits that they don't think either were called or not called. Sometimes they were not even called at all, or maybe it was a high stick or something. I mean, and it's not being a crybaby. It's just making the league aware and trying to have some accountability. And the league does not act on every single piece of tape that they get in their office. I mean, they may look at something and say, well, we don't think it was, it doesn't rise to the level of what we feel is, in other words, what happened in the game was acceptable, whether it was a no call or a 2-minute penalty, whatever. We're not going to escalate this any further based on what we've seen. But that's what they have tape for. I mean, sometimes you don't get justice, Al, right there and then on the ice. Sometimes you send a tape into the league, they take a look at it, and then justice is metered out. So I don't think this is going to necessarily bring back the days of the goon, per se, the guy who was completely talentless, who would score 2 goals. And
are you saying Stu Grimson was talentless? Come on.
I don't think you're going to see the return of that.
Yeah.
But there's a certain it doesn't, just because there aren't goons anymore doesn't mean that there aren't players who aren't a little bit more aggressive than others, if you will, and are willing to drop the gloves. And it's not like a bunch of namby-pambies out there either. There's still some guys out there that'll do that if they have to.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if there's any more fallout from this, or how it's going to be interesting what happens the next time these two teams plays, which happens to be on March 26th, the anniversary of Fight Night at the Joe. So I don't think it'll get to that point, but I just hope Larkin's okay. When it all comes in the end, he's been through a hell of a lot, and a couple of cheap shots have laid him up, and I just hope he's going to do okay. I think he will. All right, Greg, wrap things up. Who's your jerk of the week?
This is kind of a different jerk of the week. It's not real. It's not really something that's all that bad.
Yeah.
But this is something that just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. The Houston Astros lost, as you know, 12-3 to the Red Sox in Game 3 of the ALCS. Okay, it happens. Sometimes you get your ass kicked. Well, apparently, their catcher Martin Maldonado gave the team a pep talk before Game 4, like a pregame speech.
Yeah.
And it says, Chaz McCormick, the outfielder, said, Maldonado just gave us a little speech about keep fighting. These guys have been in this position for a couple of years. We're going to keep playing hard, and we're pretty pumped to play tonight. Now, come on, this is the ALCS.
Yeah.
You're down 2-1. Okay, you lost a game 12-3. This is a team that's won a World Series, that's been to postseasons left and right.
5 straight, yeah.
Played the October baseball coming out of their ears, and they got to have a veteran catcher tell them to keep their chin up after they lose the game 12-3. Keep fighting, and we're going to go out there and keep fighting and keep playing hard. I hope so.
Yeah.
I mean, you're trying to go in the World Series, for God's sakes. I don't know why that bothered me. It's like, why do we need a pep talk? Yeah. Why? I would rather they have said, you know what, it's behind us.
Yep. Burn the tape, as they say.
No, we're not going to need a pep talk after we lost 12-3. So what? You lost 12-3. It happens.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Especially it's only one game.
I just, for some reason, that just struck me.
Obviously, it's ground your gears, to say the very least.
McCormick said, we listen to them every single day, Odorizzi and Maldonado. I really appreciate that. As a person, and probably even as a team, they talked to us after the game and just told us to keep going, keep strong, stay strong. Wait, what? I'm like, how emotionally fragile are these guys? They've got to get Dusty Baker, who's 1,000,000 years old, is managing them. But Baker's been through a playoffs up the yin-yang through as a player and as a manager.
Right.
I don't know why these guys need a pep talk. And they're talking like a bunch of high school freshmen that have to be, pumped up by the big man on campus after a while. I don't understand it. I just struck me as something odd that the Astros would they say they're pumped to play. Well, I hope so. It's the ALCS.
I'm just going to say, to be honest, it must not have worked very well because we're losing 2-1 in the second inning right now.
I don't understand it.
I guess they'll have to have another pep talk later. Get one in the dugout.
Pep talk? A pep talk? Now, if this is, I understand. I know that Steve Eisman has had his moments where he's gotten in front of the team in the middle of a playoff series. You know, that's different, though. I mean, that was in the days before they won any Stanley Cups. And, you know, he sensed something that he didn't like, and he said something. These guys have been winning baseball games left and right. I don't know why they would need to be told about the foibles of the playoffs by some catcher. I don't understand it, but whatever. That's my.
Well, I'll say this: I'm never going to give you a pep talk. That's for damn sure. All right, my jerk of the week's not quite so lighthearted. I'm going with Evander Kane of the San Jose Sharks, who has been suspended 21 games without pay for essentially. Well, I wouldn't say essentially. What he did is that obviously in the NHL they don't have a mandate for a vaccine per se, but as we've talked about with Bertuzzi, it's very punitive essentially you have to, if you're not vaccinated, you have to essentially be treated like you have COVID. Right. So you're away from the team all the time. You have to be constantly tested. Right. And if you miss games and you can't travel to Canada, blah blah blah. We've talked about that. Well, instead of being vaccinated, Kane decided to submit a fake proof of vaccination card, which is illegal in the U.S. and Canada. Essentially, that's a felony. I think it's a felony. At the very least, it's got to be more than a hand slap. Regardless of that, the NHL was able to pretty much easily prove that it was fake, and Kane has been suspended 21 games by the NHL and is losing, I believe, $35,000 per game for this idiocy. So, and Kane has, I like to apologize to my teammates, to the Sharks, for violating protocol. I made a mistake. And this guy's a piece of shit anyway. I mean, there's supposedly a lot of issues with sexual assault with his wife. There's some issues. He's got issues. And this is just more proof that Kane is not a good person to do something like this. So my jerk of the week is Evander Kane for thinking he could get away with using forged government documents to avoid getting the vaccine. It's absolutely ridiculous that we've reached this point where half our podcast has been talking about people like Evander Kane and Rolovich and Kyrie Irving, and it's just awful. But how stupid can you be to think you could get away at that level with forged documents? It's ridiculous. It just shows how dumb some of these people are.
We're seeing all sorts of Looney Tunes stuff.
That is an understatement, Looney Tunes. You're insulting Bugs Bunny by saying Looney Tunes. Come on.
Right. I want to thank Siddy Hall for joining us earlier tonight and enlightening us on basketball and some of the different things to look at in terms of efficiency and other ways to look at the effect of the players have on the game and his insights on the Pistons and so forth. It was enjoyable. I really had a lot of fun. Yeah,
I'm looking forward to having him back on the show.
Yeah, we're going to bring him back sometime mid-season. We'll talk about how the Pistons are doing and other things around the NBA. Please read me every week on my WordPress Out of Bounds blog. Follow me on Twitter at Greg Eno, and of course follow the Knee Jerks on Twitter at the Knee Jerks. Al's going to tell you how to find the show in case you need to. Yes. In case you forgot how you found it the first time.
Yeah, I can do that. Sometimes I forget things too as well, Greg. So, all right. As always, you can find the show any place podcasts are found. Any place you can want to download a podcast, you can find it, including Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, Amazon Music, Deezer, Radio Public, thekneejerks.net, which is the homepage where you can find all the show notes, where you can directly download a MP3 and get the links to all the things we talk about into the social media. As always, I want to give a shout out to Linda, who is struggling to get through another shift. It's been pretty rough in ER lately. We can't wait to get back up north and just chill for a week. And I want to give a shout out to you, Greg. I hope you're not getting too chilly yet. You're still outside.
It's getting a little chilly.
Yeah, Greg had to cover up his tank top, people. So, and also, and tell Bean I said hi as well, because he's so goddamn cute. And also, I think that about covers it. So, anything else you want to add when it comes to you have anything in the hopper when it might come to upcoming guests or anything? Nothing right now, but we'll keep you updated on Twitter and elsewhere on Facebook. But nothing in the hopper just yet. But you never know. Never know. Yeah. Oftentimes, Greg surprises me on the show with these things, so I think he loves doing that. So, anyways, let's get the hell out of here. So we'll see you all in a couple weeks. Where we'll have actually the Pistons season will have started. We'll have hopefully some more Red Wings, and maybe we'll have a Lions victory to talk about. You never know at this point. Yeah. So, and by that point we may have maybe we'll talk some playoff baseball. Who the hell knows? But there's still a lot going on and a lot to cover. So. Until that time, 2 weeks from now, we'll cover the gamut in the Detroit sports. This is Al Beaton saying good evening, good luck, and aloha. Ciao to everybody. See you in 2 weeks.